The COVID-19 pandemic has dealt an unprecedented blow to women in the workforce. According to a recent RBC study, women's participation is now at its lowest level in more than 3 decades. Experts say it's particularly concerning for women of color who make up the majority of what is deemed as essential work. And they say if something isn't done now to address gender equity, then not only will women suffer, but so too will Canada's economy. With the COVID-19 economic shutdown, the sectors hardest hit with layoffs were the ones that were largely staffed by women: the service and hospitality industry, retail and travel. Women were disproportionately losing their jobs at a level not seen in previous economic recessions. And for women who are still employed and working from home, most are taking on primary childcare duties, forced to juggle their job and caring for young children. Often it comes down to deciding whether to keep their job or leave the workforce altogether if no other childcare option is available. Experts say it's an especially alarming situation when it comes to women in jobs that are deemed essential.
Over 70% of essential workers in Canada are actually women. But what we're seeing at YWCA in the statistics is that it's actually predominantly vulnerable women, so racialized, Black identified, Indigenous.
They're the jobs relied on heavily by Canada's economy, and yet they're often the ones with least protections. According to a recent report by the Canadian Women's Foundation, over half of all female workers are employed in occupations involving the 5 C's: caring, clerical, catering, cashiering, and cleaning. And it is these jobs, predominantly held by women of color, that are at the highest risk for COVID-19 infection.
When you see across Toronto, for example, where COVID is hitting hardest, it is in the communities, the low-income communities of racialized folks around the edges of the city, because they're the people who do not have the option to not work during the pandemic. So they're doing the frontline work under high-risk conditions and are paying the cost of that with their health and their lives, literally.
Faraday notes that many jobs are held by migrant and undocumented women. Earlier this month, we spoke to a migrant childcare worker from Grenada who said she was fired and immediately kicked out of her employer's home because she was sick, even though it wasn't with COVID-19.
I was so humiliated. I had to make 5 phone calls before someone could come and pick me up from the street. We are working hard. We are contributing to the economy of the country. And what do we get in return? This is tantamount to slavery.
The response can't be, well, we'll just go back to normal and we'll just let that keep happening. The response has to be, we won't let that continue. We won't let people be at risk. And so we need to rebuild in a way that really provides social security for all of us.
Coming up, how to rebuild. We speak to the experts about what needs to be done and what the very first priority should be. A new RBC study has revealed that the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected women, pushing progress back decades. Experts say it could take generations to rebuild what's being lost unless gender equity is built into the economic recovery plan. Earlier today, I spoke to the CEO of the YWCA, who are set to release a plan on how to do just that.
What would the economy look like if, women did drop out and we didn't do anything about it?
If we take women out of the equation, it would actually lead to a drop in GDP, and that's also dangerous. With COVID, domestic violence rates have increased anywhere between 20 to 40%. So it's also putting a lot of women at risk, because for women in lockdown to be isolated with your abuser, that could potentially be a death sentence.
What's the most immediate thing that government can do?
A really concrete step that the government could announce tomorrow is actually to invest in affordable, accessible, and high-quality childcare. Without that, we can't have women go back into the workforce. Not only will people be able to go back to work sooner, but there's also some really interesting economic research coming out of the UK, coming out of the Quebec, showing that if you actually invest money in care work, it can actually create millions of jobs. We can also invest in women entrepreneurs. We've seen, for example, with all of the really amazing support Canadians have done around anti-racism in response to Black Lives Matter's protests. We have amazing Black identified and Indigenous entrepreneurs who are doing really, really innovative work, selling their work online, investing in vulnerable and racialized and BIPOC women entrepreneurs would be a really concrete way that the economy can get back on its feet.
YWCA Canada, along with the University of Toronto, will be releasing their Feminist Economic Recovery Plan for Canada on July 28th, and it will be available online. In Toronto, Erica Natividad, City News.